Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We have with us a Rumble exclusive, as promised, the one and only Mr. Jim Willie, who is graciously giving us his cues per censorship, so he is able to speak here freely, which we always encourage. As you know, Mr. Willie is an expert statistician with over 25 years of experience in that realm, but many, many years in the financial and geopolitical realm, as you are aware. And he's been gracious enough to join us again to give us some insights and information on some very important subjects at hand. Now, if you are new to the channel, please do like, subscribe, and share so we can get this message out to more people that are being blessed in the way that you are. Mr. Willie, thanks for joining us once again, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm under siege. I have been attacked again, and I'm not really tired. I'm disgusted that the attacks can continue so easily. I'm dealing with something locally here. I call it extortion. They call it tax. I call it extortion. They call it tax. It's extortion. Who are we kidding? Okay. Anyway, there's a lot going on. And, you know, if you were to ask Donald Trump, do you really think that you violated the law in paying Stormy? No, I don't think so. You think you really violated the law when you took some documents to Mar-a-Lago? No. Okay, so he's a victim of legal attacks, and they're giving it a name. They're calling it lawfare. It's politically motivated court prosecution. That's my best description of it. That's pretty close. And, you know, let me just make a comment about the Atlanta and the New York events for Donald Trump. They go nowhere. And they get dropped.
Yep.
So to me, it's like their intention is to sidetrack him. It's not to put him away. It's to sidetrack him, to distract him. And I said with each one, by the time they get near the end, they'll drop the case. They will delay the case. And then you'll start seeing the prosecutors getting arrested. And we might have that right now in New York City. There are reports, and it's really hard to confirm, that the prosecutor and some jurors are gone. And they might have a residence, let's just say 80 miles from Miami, in an island location where they're not getting much sun. Okay. All right. Anyway, that's, I think, the consequence of dealing with politically motivated legal prosecution. And anyway, I'm dealing with my own, and it's draining. And I've got a lot of support. And I've been told that my crucifixes in the back are not all that visible or not that impressive looking. And hey, they are what they are. And the blue one is St. Michael, and the reddish brown one is a crucifix of our Lord Jesus, who died for our sins and provided us a route for salvation if we choose to take it.
Yes.
I'm speaking very loosely. All right. I don't know where you want to go with this. How do you want to start? You want to?
Well, I mean, let's start, Jim. Thank you for opening up with that, because it's a very important position to get that cemented, that foundation cemented to move forward with the Lord. So, with respect,
don't mind me.
No, I'm just focusing right now. With respect, Jim, to where we can start the conversation, you and I talked offline. There are a number of countries we need to be watching, but your position, and I tend to agree with you, is there's two primary countries we need to be focusing on that are going to provide a very pivotal transition in the victory that we're all anticipating, both financially and geopolitically. So I think that might be a good place for us to start with that.
Yeah, well, the first one is Telegram, where a CEO named Durov, Russian-born, but residing in the United Arab Emirates, like in a sanctuary state. He was arrested in France, and he didn't see it coming because he didn't have to set foot in France. France, in my opinion, is one of the most disgustingly corrupt and satanic of all the Western European nations. Now, there's a lot of stories behind the Telegram issue, and I'm going to just go with some of the impressions that I have been gathering. And I don't have perfect information on this, but it appears that Telegram has been almost like a news network. Telegram is unique. It's not like Facebook. It's not like Instagram. Telegram is like a constant flow of stories having to do with finance, economics, social, political, and war. And I am told that a very important series of news items was essentially informing Russia about NATO activities in Ukraine. It almost had become, in part, there's a lot having to do with, the U.S. economy and monetary policy and banks. Okay, so maybe 90% had nothing to do with the war in Ukraine, which is a war now. I was calling it a security operation for a while because I refused to make a statement that Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia was defending against the slaughter, ethnic cleansing in the eastern Donbass. But it looks like Telegram was being used to pass on some pretty precise, delicate, valuable military intel. Now, so the French government arrested Durov. And I have later heard that it's Durov's brother, and I don't know his name, Durov's brother, who was the main brains behind war intelligence sharing. So there's a lot going on there. And, it was 2 years ago, John, that I had my first Arab, Persian Gulf. They call it the Gulf region. I call it Persian Gulf and Gulf region. But it was an Arab, British educated, and he did a consult call with me. And to me, they're very valuable. They're like boots on the ground. And 1 in 10 consult calls is very valuable to me. The others, I just answer questions, do the best I can, and they're happy, and we hang up. And there's a lot discussed. But this guy in Oman said there are a number of Russians here, and they are escaping the draft, and they live here safely, and there's no extradition, there's no draft. They live here safely. And I believe Durov was one of them. I think he's in his late 20s or early 30s, military age. So they nabbed him in France, and they're trying to suppress information. And a lot of the Western stories about Telegram and Durov have to do with suppressing and censoring information in a general sense. But I think the real aim for the French government, acting on behalf of the NATO uberlords in Geneva, I think the French motive was to try to prevent a lot of the military intel to be used in Telegram. I think Telegram will continue, and I think the French will back down. There are consequences. The community of nations is really tired of the cabal actions, the heavy-handed censorship and sanctions economically, like Russian gas. So UAE said we're going to suspend energy contracts with France. Good luck getting your energy supply. UAE is no spring chicken to fighting the war games at a financial level. It was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Oh gosh, I'm not exactly sure. I think it was early 23, year and a half ago. The UAE pulled out of a bond offering with Credit Suisse because Credit Suisse was involved in Russian asset seizure. So UAE brought about the Credit Suisse bankruptcy. UAE is no small player. They're not to be trifled with. All right. there's a lot more to the Telegram story, a lot more to that. I included it in the August newsletter, but it's not really deep. I did the best I can, and my emphasis is not on military intel censorship. That's not my emphasis. It's finance, economics, banking, currency, trade payment, and trade payment vehicles. So I had more on the BRICS trade payment developments, and we got a meeting coming up next month in Kazar, Russia. That's very big. But let's get quickly to Brazil, because they are taking on they're taking on Elon Musk and Twitter X, and Camel Toe Harris had decided that she's going to get on that bandwagon to urge more censorship along her communist Marxist policies. But there's a Supreme Court justice in Brazil, and they showed themselves a year and a half ago by rubber stamping the stolen election for Lula when Bolsonaro won rather handily.
Yeah.
And Bolsonaro is, let's just say, he's the anti-Satanist and pro-liberty candidate in Brazil, and the theft of that election rubber stamped by the Supreme Court, including Morales, not Morales with an L. Take the L out. It's Portuguese. It's Morales. That Supreme Court justice, they banned X Twitter. And back 18 months ago, they rubber stamped the Lula stolen victory, and the result was 1 million people per day making a demonstration in Rio de Janeiro. 1 million. And I heard that one of them was 5 million people taking part in a demonstration against the Supreme Court corruption and the stolen election by Lula. And there were reports just a couple of days ago that Lula had a satanic parade, and it was very poorly attended. So there's a lot going on. You know, good luck. I think Elon Musk is someone not to be trifled with, kind of like UAE. What Elon Musk has promised to do now is to release in Brazil, well, you know, the internet doesn't reside in a country, it resides in the Ethernet, the Ethernet. What Elon Musk has promised to do, John, is to release a lot of evidence having to do with this justice, this Judge Morales, for his corruption. And Brazil has promised heavy fines. Get a load of this. For people who use virtual private networks to access the X Twitter files, pretending to be in Argentina or Venezuela or Ecuador or Peru. You know, good luck with that, you idiots. This is going to fall on Morales. And I don't expect that he's going to be around in his post. I don't mean dead. I mean active as a just. He's receiving narco money bribery to support Lula. I hear Bolsonaro is probably going to come back, and it'll be part of the anti-cabal and anti-Satanist administration regimes. When it's corrupt, they deserve the name regime. When it's a popular, honest government, they deserve the name administration. They're administering the popular will, as opposed to the regime putting out the cabal directives. Okay, we got a lot coming down the pike, and we're reaching like a crescendo of communist and Marxist policies. What I find amusing, John, is that the liberal retards, they all go, yeah, let's do more censorship. Yeah, Trump is evil. We need Elon censored too. And they don't even realize this is what communism is. Let's jail Trump. He's so ugly and arrogant. He wants to make an imperial country. No, We got an imperial puppet country run by cabal, Marxist, fascist. Let me make a distinction so that people understand that I'm not confused, because I throw terms around. When the government is formed by the coalition of powerful economic and business sectors, like medical, news, pharmacy, energy, banking, social network, big tech, search engine, those are your components for a fascist structure. And out of the fascist structure comes a lot of policies like censorship to support the structure, like lawfare against Trump to eliminate or attempt to eliminate the overthrow of the structure with a new president. The support of war, which is really money laundering. A lot of the money going to Ukraine doesn't go to the war effort. And a lot of money, very little money, goes to the people of Ukraine. The majority goes to the Geneva Uberlords and to black market sales of our weapons, where the Russians are among the buyers. The black market is in Albania. Okay, so we've got Marxist policies, communist policies, abrogating free speech. Camel Toe Harris is now talking about a forced, what do you call it? A forced repurchase by the government of their weapons. And she was asked, what about the Second Amendment? And she said, we need to do the right thing. The right thing for what? For support of the Marxist policies and the fascist structure. That's the distinction: fascist structure and communist Marxist policies. That's what we're dealing with. And you know, I suspect in the next year, we're going to have one of the most remarkable waves of popular removal of Satanist, Marxist government officials and their structures. And then comes the rollback of their laws and policies. You know, it wasn't 2 weeks that the fake Biden and the fake inauguration in January of 2021, it wasn't 2 weeks before 250 Trump appointed judges were fired. It wasn't 2 weeks before the, what do you call it? The Columbia pipeline, the Columbia pipeline going to Canada. It was disconnected. And it wasn't 3 months before the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for the United States began to get drained. And if details are shared, the sales went to China. China bought our oil reserves. So if we have an oil and gasoline and diesel problem, John, it's because we sold our reserves to China. That's an act of treason. I need to go ahead.
I was just waiting for you to, I wanted to help give you the chance to finish. Thank you. And then you're absolutely right. And I do believe that there's going to be a resurgence of God's people and of the truth and justice being restored through this entire process. We're going through the darkness into the light, which is a good segue, Jim, to, I know one of the things you wanted to talk about. We've obviously discussed this before. We're in an Ephesians 6:12 moment, aka spiritual warfare, battle of God versus Satan, and contention for many things: the truth, justice, like you mentioned, the wealth transfer, getting it out of the hands of the wicked over to the righteous, as Proverbs says. What are you seeing at the present rate, and how do you see this all playing out, Jim, for the remainder of the year in terms of the reset that we're anticipating?
Reset of what?
The finances, the currencies.
Financial reset.
Correct.
I think we're going to have other resets, and I'll get to that
I think you're right.
later.
Okay.
Let me make a comment about the satanic and Christian warfare. There was a woman, I'll get to your question. There was a woman at the Olympics, and she won a gold medal. And she let it be known that she was going to thank the Lord Jesus Christ and express her faith in God and Christ. And she was told if she did, they would strip her of her gold medal. and I don't know what the event was. It wasn't, I think it might have been swimming. I'm not sure. It might have been synchronized swimming. I'm not sure. I just don't know what the event was. And what did she do, John? She did sign language to thank the Lord Jesus. I don't know any sign language at all. I do know this. That means love. And this means I don't know. Anyway, we're in a battle. And I got some news for people. The opening night ceremony of the Olympics in Paris, they had some satanic symbols. They had a number of them. And I was told later by a very well-connected client, they sacrificed that night 100 children. They sacrificed them. Okay. I regard France as being the most disgustingly criminal and satanic of all Western European nations. All right, now, you ask, what do I expect the rest of the year for financial reset? I expect very little. Trump is not in charge. I expect in the rest of this year, we're going to see more of the same price inflation. We're going to have more of the same extraordinary debt accumulation by the government. We're going to see continued rise in insurance costs. I think that's part of the weaponry used to force people to sell their homes to BlackRock. Let me change your question. After Trump is in charge, what do I expect on the financial front for a reset? How's that?
Sure. However you want to, characterize it.
In anticipation of more financial problems in the rest of the year, we might get an interest rate cut. We thought that it was going to happen maybe in June or July. They talked a lot about it. They didn't do it. There could be a rate cut in later this month and next month. I'm told that we're very likely to see a 50 basis point rate cut and a total of 150 basis cuts altogether. And what I found humorous, okay, this is kind of transition. We're going to get more of the same. And the fact we didn't get a rate cut in June, July, and August means that they're going to let us just freak out as a nation financially. They're going to let us worry to death as a nation. They're trying to scare us and worry us to death. I found it interesting that John Hatzius of Goldman Sachs, this is not new, but in July, he issued an article. And, with the falsified inflation data and with the falsified labor data and with the falsified economic growth data, he made the case, a false case, for 150 basis point rate cut. He's telling us where we're going, and they needed a justification. They needed the road signs. The economy is slowing down, but inflation is also now more under control. No, it's not. Not at all. But they needed the road signs, which are propaganda written by the financial sector that is captured. All right. I prefer talking about the consequences of rate cuts, whether they're pushed by Trump or pushed by Wall Street banks. Now, for those who don't know, it was 3 years ago that Trump, 4 years ago, that Trump disconnected the Federal Reserve from the Geneva banksters and Uber lords. The Federal Reserve now is owned by shares. 35% is JP Morgan ownership. It's a Wall Street entity. What they try to do is give the appearance of independence. Like Jerome Powell, the Fed head, we're told that he makes independent decisions, but that's after receiving pressure behind closed doors by Wall Street banks. So it's not independent, and it's not without pressure. I think we're going to see a lot of unexpected events. I call them unforeseen consequences. If they cut interest rates, okay, where I'm going now, John, is the absolute epitome of controlled markets that are not capitalist based. We're going to see a rate cut and maybe a sequence, and maybe soon, whether it's right before or after the inauguration of Trump. I heard Trump already won, so let's not worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very interesting comment that I just made, but let's not worry about that. Trump won. Yeah. Let's not worry about that. When they cut rates, it'll be Wall Street ordering the cut of rates. And one of their motives will be, well, we need lower rates to have lower borrowing costs for the federal debt. It's 1.2 trillion a year. So if they lower the rates, it might only be 1.05 trillion a year. Mm-hmm. Whoop-de-doo, right? Another motive, and this is more relevant. Wall Street banks are the primary holders of over 700 billion in unrealized bond losses. And they want some relief on that. So maybe after they do some rate cuts, they'll only be down $580 billion. Whoop-de-doo. That's not going to be a big impact, but that's what they want to do. Now, this gets more complicated. And here's where the absent capitalist market comes from. There might be an impression that lowering the interest rates is going to cause more price inflation. And I think it very well might in certain sectors. And this is a very difficult area, very difficult. If we get more price inflation expectation, we're going to see the opposite reaction by the 10-year bond. They're going to cut short-term interest rates, and the long-term rates might go up from higher inflation expectation. And the way I try to describe the complexity is that there's some sectors of the market that will need lower rates to encourage greater supply, and that'll bring down inflation. But there are other areas of the economy where the craziness and abuse of credit is causing problems and will result in higher inflation. Here's how the capitalist market undermined is going to happen. If they cut rates, they're going to issue more funny money, just printing money. And they're going to use printed money to buy the long bond. It'll be quantitative easing, QE again, without the name. And they're actually calling it yield curve control. They don't want to say this is QE again, like in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16. They're going to call it yield curve control of a prudent variety. And it's anti-market. And I don't think it's going to result in much success. And I don't think they're going to reduce. Okay, you know, this is really sickening. They might reduce the interest on the debt, but the debt's going to go up and out of control. So they're not really going to reduce the total volume on interest on the debt. They're going to bring down the interest rate on the debt, and the debt's going to go up still $1 trillion every what? 5 months? Okay, you know, we are in an out of control situation, and our fiscal and financial reset, let's just call it recalibration. I really hate the description and the metaphors of they're just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. They're doing window dressing for broken windows. They're doing recalibration of a jalopy whose engine sputters. they're going to make adjustments for something that's just plain old broken. Now, we're not with a federal bus and truck that's along the side of the road. No, no, no. It's still running down the road and still running over people and still running through houses. And they're throwing these little grenades to the side, destroying businesses. This is still a very active, predatory, and destructive federal government as far as the finances are concerned. And you know, they're printing money and sending pallets of printed money and billions to Ukraine. We need to end the war and not move to a new location in the Middle East for the war. Trump, let me just make some comments because that's pretty much all I can say about, unless we get down to more specifics. Trump is going to have his life threatened consistently by the Rockefellers for attempting legal remedy for wrongful death and injury, class action lawsuits, maybe in the trillions. I mean, if they attach 5 to 10 million victims for wrongful death, if they each get $1 million, what's $1 million? It's $1 trillion. Mm-hmm. We could easily get to wrongful death class action lawsuits in the trillions. I just said how. 1 million people, $1 million each. It's going to be more than 1 million. Right. They're lining up now. Kansas is making more progress than any other state. Trump is going to get assassination attempts from the FBI and Homeland Security, which, by the way, is in charge of Secret Service. Who does Secret Service answer to? When Cheadle resigned, who got reappointed? By whom? Homeland Security. Notice that they promise transparency and don't share data, and then we learn that evidence was destroyed. That's the opposite. That is an act of obstruction of justice. Okay, I'm going to make some bold comments here, John, because I'm not bashful. And I got a lot of opinions. Some of them I don't share. I think we're going to get a political reset, and it's going to surprise a lot of people. I think we might get a couple of Supreme Court justices dismissed, and I'm not going to tell you how. I just think they're going to be dismissed. You know, it could be for a number of different reasons, including bad behavior in their written opinions. I'll give you an example. This Justice Jackson, Letitia Jackson, Katanya Jackson. She wrote an opinion for the dissent regarding the, I can't think of the name. The Supreme Court decision where the 3-letter agencies cannot, Cheyenne. Oh gosh, I can't think of the name of the case. I can't think of the case. But do you remember the name of the case where the fisheries, Chevron deference. Chevron deference.
Yeah.
Okay, boy, thank you, Lord, for bailing me out. Okay, Katanya Jackson wrote in her dissenting opinion, we cannot have a rollback of all of the different 3-letter agency decisions regarding fines and costs, which is what happened with the fisheries. And this is the best part, because it would cause too much disruption. Now, is that citing precedents, legal precedents, and constitutional articles? Or is that defending a fascist structure? Okay, sorry, Justice Jackson, you're fired, because we got that and 18 others of a similar variety where you're not doing your job. Your job as a justice to apply the Constitution and to bring out precedents, to cite articles and actual passages of the Constitution. And, you know, when my sister and brother were each in law school, I was fascinated by the number of different precedents that they could cite. And this is how you build the legal system and the application and meting out of justice. To say that it would cause too many problems is a defense of the system, and the system is corrupt and it is fascist. Trump is going to be in charge of other fiscal resets. He is on record numerous times saying we're going to reduce the bureaucracy by 60%. We're going to eliminate entire 3-letter agencies. Like, for instance, Department of Education. And could you please tell me what the heck does Department of Energy do? Do they have 100,000 employees? So maybe their main role is to create jobs without profit. Profit and loss? No, that's not what we do. It reminds me of a candidate who 5 years ago here in my little country of residence promised to create new jobs. And he got elected. And then we found out what the new jobs were. More federal jobs and higher taxes. Okay, you need to improve and build the private sector and reduce what they call the public sector. I prefer to call it the federal sector, the government sector. Trump is going to have tremendous resistance, and he's going to get death threats for reducing the bureaucracy, eliminating the Internal Revenue Service, trimming. Can you imagine the resistance for cutting in half the military budget? Let's not get ridiculous and call it a defense budget. They create enemies and then we defend against the enemies. But it's very little on home ground. They defend the Israeli border more than they defend the US border. They defend the Ukrainian border better than they defend the Texas-US border. Unbelievable. The other efforts by Trump regarding finance, he is on record as saying he wants to bring about a lower value dollar to create an advantage for trade. And I've got some unfortunate news for him. It's not going to work in Europe. It will not work in England. And that's where a big part of the targeted economies reside. And that's because they all operate with the Forex currencies. Forex, foreign exchange currencies. The British pound, the euro, and the Swiss franc is kind of tied at the hip to the euro. It's freer, but it's tied at the hip, which is a long story. When he's talking about creating a trade advantage with a cheaper dollar, it might be primarily against China. China is strengthening their currency, the yuan, by means of taking trade surplus and not buying treasury bonds anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they're buying gold.
Right.
And the Japanese are earning our anger in Washington. I could make an hour-long story about Japan, and it's very complicated, but let me mention only a couple things. Japan wants to get rid of their treasury bonds. And when they did, and did not retain the dollar reserve fund that backed up their Japanese yen, their yen went down. Now, this is a paradox. The Japanese sold almost $200 billion worth of treasury bonds and their currency went down over 20%. And what I found fascinating, John, is that there was nothing in the Wall Street Journal about that.
Yeah.
Because what it means is that when our friends dump the treasuries, the dollar will go up. That's fascinating. If the European partners sell a lot of treasury bonds and they load up in their central banks on gold, the euro will go down. The dollar will go up. Okay, that's just one angle. And, you know, the Japanese have not escaped the crisis that began 2 years ago now. 2 years ago now. It's actually 3 years ago, but they had a long year of dumping the treasuries, and then an impact in the middle of that time, like in early 22. What they did, John, was they printed a lot of yen to cover foreigners who were selling their government debt and who taking big losses because the yen went down. And foreigners who held Japanese government bonds, they lost money because the yen went down. And the lessons to American allies is that your government debt will be dumped by foreigners if you sell treasuries. We have loaded the entire globe with toxic U.S. government treasury bonds. This is a bad situation. And what they have to do is slowly dump the treasury bonds and accumulate gold in order to have a gold-based banking system, currency system, trade payment system. I'm not done with Japan. I'll say only one more thing, and this is very complicated. In the 1990 decade, early, the Japanese had a very successful economy. They turned their quality control completely around. They had a pretty bad 1970 decade of quality control, and my brother bought a Toyota Corona in 1974, and it was a rust bucket. The Japanese turned their quality control around, and by 1990, they were an export power, and they had a new problem. Their currency got strong because their export trade industry was so powerful and diverse. You had the automotive, you had the computers, you had other technology, you had the cameras, and they had a diverse export economy. So Wall Street got into the room and said, why don't you go down to 0%? That'll weaken your currency. And they had a secondary motive to borrow the 0% money and to buy treasury bonds and earn 6% with absolutely no work. It's called the yen carry trade. They built up $15 trillion. Now, what's 6% of $15 trillion? I believe it's $900 billion a year in income for doing exactly no work. All right, now we blamed the August 6th event on Japan for causing a global financial episode, and it got pulled in. We didn't let it get out of control, and we blame the Japanese for it. The Japanese announced that they want to sell $400 billion more of treasury bonds. What they have to do now is manage life on the edge of a knife, life on the edge of a cliff. They have to remove treasury bonds, suffer a decline in their yen currency, build up their gold reserves in order to build up their yen currency. I'll repeat that. They need to dump a lot of treasury bonds, which will harm their yen currency. They need to then build up their gold reserves that will lift up their yen currency. And they have provided the BRICS with a model of the disaster. So the BRICS nations are doing it slowly. But I got news a couple months ago that the BRICS nations had sold $2 trillion Now that's a lot of treasury bond chicken. I don't have names, but it's hiding in USD Tether. Okay, it's hiding. And US government officials want to use that to wreck Bitcoin. So why is Donald Trump talking about the United States becoming a Bitcoin center for global trade? Because he foresees that we can use a combination of gold and Bitcoin for backing up our banking system, our currency, and using it for trade payment. Because I got news for people. Our treasury bill is not widely accepted anymore at the trade ports. I got called down by a client who said, Jim, I actually work at the Long Beach facility and there is very active trade. So you got that wrong. I wrote back to him and said, how are they making payment for the trade that's going off the ships and onto trucks at Long Beach? And he did not reply. I told him that they were using oil super tanker credits. The United States is filling super tankers that going to Asia, going to Europe, and that's how we're getting paid. I'm sorry, that's how they're getting paid. The shipping nations, the exporters, the nations shipping to the United States, they're getting paid, and they're saying, look, we want hard asset. We don't want your treasury bill. So we're saying, well, okay, we can give you some gold, but we can give you a lot of oil. And pretty soon, I don't think we're going to have a lot of oil, and we're going to have maybe a very big problem. But I believe Donald Trump will be the president by then, and we're going to have some very rapid reforms. And I believe Wall Street will be very angry, but I believe Wall Street has been captured, which is another story all unto itself. I think JP Morgan is going to be a great influencer and policy maker that the rest of the nation is going to follow. Go ahead.
I'm just processing everything you said. To be honest, there's just a lot of the comments you made kind of encircled a lot of the questions I was going to ask. So honestly, I'm just trying to figure out where to go from here because you covered a lot of ground, as you typically do inside those statements.
Why don't you hit on your specific question, and I will try to drive home a very pointed answer.
No, that's fine. And thank you for going through all the copious details. Always, we appreciate it. It's great food for thought. I guess I would start with, you talked about, you made a good point. Well, many good points, but you made a good point regarding President Trump. He's already won, but let's not worry about that. So they've gloss over that small detail. They've extenuated, as we know, the corrupt trial with Marchand, who's a Marxist. You well know, till November. I mean, isn't that kind of like them conceding that he won? Because at that point, he'll already have won. And I mean, it's going to be much to do about nothing. I mean, people are concerned about him doing jail time and all that.
Well, let me just say a few things about the election and why I think it's already won.
Sure.
The pollsters are now being challenged. The political pollsters. Some of them are being accused of completely fabricating polls. 4 years ago, they used to double count and triple count the Democrats or double sample and triple sample the Democrats in the registered, the sampling rolls. I don't think they're even doing sampling now. And they're being accused of not doing any sampling. They're being accused of completely making up. There was a political poll that I cited in July, and it was based out of Wall Street. I think it was called Politic Predict or predictpolitic.com, something like that. And this is just one example. After the complete debacle by China Joe, Sleepy Joe, Dead Man Joe, golly, what's his name? Joseph Biden. The guy playing Joseph Biden, he fell on his face. 20 ways to Sunday. Okay. The Wall Street poll saw Trump go up 17.5%. Yet CNN, ABC, Washington Post, all those clowns, they said that Biden lost 3.5%. No, it was 5 times that. They said that he can make up that 3.5% by active campaigning. Well, the active campaigning is to largely empty rooms. And that's what Camel Toe Harris is up against. Camel Toe has a problem in that she's an alcoholic, whereas, Barack Obama was a coke addict, whereas, Clinton was a coke addict, whereas Baby Bush was a coke addict. They weren't just narco presidents, they were coke addicts. Papa Bush was not a coke addict. Okay, the major news networks and their polling offices are being challenged. They're being compared against empty rooms where Camel Toe Harris was giving campaign speeches, like in Philadelphia. But now they got a new way of filling up rooms, of paying homeless people $150 to show up at the Harris campaign stops. They got caught. I don't know where it was. It was in the Northeast somewhere. Reflections off the plane showed an empty tarmac, but the computer-generated imagery showed 5,000 people yelling and waving to Camel Toe. They got caught, but they're continuing. And as they get caught, and as they're embarrassed, and as they're being exposed, we've got a parade, and I've heard that it's about 50 prominent people who are advocating now a Trump victory, including the entire family of Governor Walz, the Nazi in Minnesota, his entire family, brother, sister-in-law, the father. I believe they're in Iowa or Nebraska. I can't remember exactly where they're located, but I saw a picture of all of them, and they're all advocating Trump with big sign, Walt's family for Trump. Okay, let me ask a couple of very pointed questions. Why did the Dem Party, they're not Democratic, so they don't earn the name Democratic Party. Why did the Dem Fascist Party allow Harris to be their candidate without a single grassroots delegate? Because they're not Democratic. Why do they allow a person with a very brief Senate record like Obama, less than 4 years in the Senate, can't call that experience? Why'd they allow someone with a record to the left, more liberal than Bernie Sanders, and a really disgusting resume in California as Attorney General? Why did they allow that person to become their candidate? Let me just throw something out with you, John. Because the Democrats either are forced to come up with an extreme candidate because they don't control the center, or the White Hats are controlling the Dem Fascist Party. And the White Hats have ordered them, you put out your most extreme, your most absurd candidates. And is Walz from Minnesota one of the most absurd you've ever seen in your adult life? Tampons in the men's room, calling a stand down of police during the 2020 riots that claimed lives and property damage. Get out of the way for Floyd George and that whole incident. Open the door for 10 to 20,000 Africans from Somalia. And there's a lot more. Okay, one of the most absurd candidates I have ever seen in my adult life. So are they on orders from the White Alliance to make this the weakest Dem Fascist Party ticket in history so that you guarantee a loss? Because on the battleground states, they've had election reforms And I believe we're going to have arrests on election night in battleground states at the tabulation centers. It could be from plainclothes U.S. Marines working for the JAGs. And JAG, by the way, a judge, advocate general. Think of it as the legal staff for the Marines and the military. Judge, advocate general, JAG. You remember the movie where Demi Moore was an assistant and Tom Cruise was the lead attorney of the JAGs?
A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men. And Jack Nicholson said, "You can't handle the truth." Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Those attorneys in uniform were JAGs. They might have been Navy JAGs because they were dealing with an incident in Guantanamo of killing a couple of soldiers during what they call a red alert. And Jack Nicholson was the commanding general on that base. Okay. The attorneys, I believe we've got 1,000 JAG attorneys at work. I believe we've got 10 times the number of arrests that we hear about through the grapevine. I believe, and I was told by 2 different consult clients, well, one was more like an information dump by a retired U.S. Army Ranger. He said, "Jim, I got news for you. The biggest volume of tribunals is Andrews military base outside Washington." He said, "It's just a short trip. They arrest them in Washington, they take them to Andrews." He said, "They've got 20 tribunals there." He said, "They got a lot in Gitmo, Guantanamo." And I defy Americans to even spell Guantanamo. And I got to admit, I do a spell check, John.
Yeah.
I do a spell check before I send off the monthly report. And, I'm not bashful. This is a list. I'm not going to let you see. This is a list of the misspelled words. I'm not going to let you read them, but this is a list of misspelled words. That's typical for 1 month and a 45-page report. So I misspell things. And on 3 different occasions, I've misspelled Guantanamo. It has a lot of A's and no I. I always put an I at the end.
Yeah.
It's not Guantanamo, it's Guantanamo. Okay. There is a lot of activity, and the aerial photographs of Guantanamo show like a 10-fold expansion of facilities. You get a picture 10 years ago, you see a couple of spots. You get a picture now, you see 12 spots, everything expanded. And the Army Ranger told me, "Jim, they have gone down 12 stories, 12 floors underground in Guantanamo to make prison cells." He said it's a tremendous expansion. All right. There are a lot of complaints by good people, and I understand. I'm among them. I wish we had a little more information about progress for arrests and progress for fixing the Congress. And we may have already seen that. And we're not told because we're not military. So I believe we have had military operations during continued civilian rule. Now, that is a very big distinction, and it deserves explanation. We have a lot of military operations, which means they're doing things, they're capturing people, and they've got a rule, and I'm not exactly in favor of it. They say we don't want collateral damage. We're only going to arrest somebody when that person is alone in upstate New York at his home and only 2 guards. Well, we'll knock out the guards and we'll capture them. Well, why not do it on a New York City street with 20 witnesses and maybe a little bit of gunfire? Okay, we're in the middle of a civil war, and we're in the middle of let me rephrase that. We're in the middle of a violent coup d'etat where 160 murder incidents have taken place with the Clinton Foundation. They're murders. Seth Rich was murdered. We had a murder just several months ago where a person was wired around the neck against a tree and the neck was slit, and they called it suicide. How do you put wire around a tree and your neck and slit your own throat? I can see a razor cut or a knife cut. Okay. How do you have 2 shotgun wounds to the chest and call it suicide? Okay. How do you have a nail gun at 3 meters away and call it suicide? Okay. We have a lot of violent killings. I don't see any problem in making arrests on Washington streets, on Houston streets, on New York City streets, on Philadelphia streets, on Los Angeles streets. Let's expose the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. Let's tell people what it is. We have to wait for the emergency broadcast. I was told that it might occur on September 6th.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's 4 days ago. I'm told it might occur on September 13th. Okay, that's this Friday. Here we are on September 10th, and I'm told a lot of my segments are being stolen, and they put a different date on it. John, I'm very encouraged by what's coming, but you never win that last battle without some casualties.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling like I'm a casualty. And I have promised the Lord that I will not quit. And there are a lot of good people who are being harmed. I don't know for a fact that the head of Telegram, Durov, is a really good guy. I think he is. I don't know enough about his private life. I don't know if he has, like 6 slave women living in his mansion in UAE. I don't know. But we are going to have some collateral damage. And what I'm noticing now is that people are jumping ship. And we did see a lot of cartoons after the debacle of the debate in late July, a lot of cartoons of people jumping ship, but we've not seen Schumer from New York jumping ship. We've not seen the replacement masked or cloned Pelosi jumping ship. We haven't seen a lot of key figures, but now we are seeing a conversion of Zuckerberg.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe he was given an offer. We will put you in jail for 20 years. We will take 80% of your assets unless you follow our directive. We want a fair election. Now, Trump has said something, and here we are, a month and a half in front of the election. He said something that he never did in September of 2020. He never said, if this is an unfair, rigged election, we're going to capture you, arrest you, and put you in prison for the rest of your life. Okay, that's seditious treason.
Mm-hmm.
But he is saying that now. And I can't get a straight answer because he doesn't know from a military source. When I asked him again last week, will there be plainclothes military Marines in the tabulation centers in Atlanta, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York City, and Los Angeles? And he said, pardon me, I hiccups.
That's okay.
He said, I don't know. I suspect, as you do, that they will, but I don't know, and they won't answer me. And I'm wondering, I didn't say to him, but I'm wondering, is the answer yes, and we're not going to tell you? And why? Because it will be a military operation in the midst of civilian rule. We have civilian rule. We don't have a military junta running the country. In my opinion, we've got something worse. We got a satanic cult, traffickers, and their junta in Geneva. And I believe those are the people that harm me in a spiritual sense. They harm me. I have told many different clients a number of stories, and I believe they're direct responses to my open mouth. In my entire life, John, I have called out friends for doing dastardly deeds. I once called the wife of a good friend of mine and said, your husband is fooling around with his secretary. You're a good woman and you got a little baby and you need to tell Ed to stop. And you know what happened? I got a nasty phone call from Ed that night. He said, what gives you the right to interfere with my marriage? And I said, I think you've got a higher order question to answer to, and it's not to me. It's to God, it's to your marriage oath, and it's to your lovely wife. And you got a little baby. 2 months later, Ed apologized to me and said, Jim, you helped save my marriage. You know, it's tough sometimes to tell the truth. It's tough sometimes to confront a friend.
Yep.
And I truly believe, and I learned this lesson when I was 15 years old, 14 years old. I said to my good friends and my dad, you know, Dad, I think if I tell a lie, I'll need 3 more lies in the next few days. He said, Jim, you might need 3 new lies in 3 new days. And I said, yeah. And you know what? That's hard, Daddy. That's hard. And I said, you know, it's a lot easier to tell the truth, face the consequences. I didn't use those terms. I said something like, it's easier to tell the truth and whatever happens, I just have to deal with it. I once, when I was 14, pulled a false fire alarm. And the fire engines came streaming through in a matter of minutes. And I admitted to my dad, Dad, I did something really stupid. I did that. He said, what? What did you do? You lit a fire? I said, no, I pulled the alarm. I did it on a dare. I dare you, Jimmy. I said, oh, don't dare me. Anyway, it's very hard to be honest. And if you're a very, very wealthy person, they try to draw you into their club and to corrupt you and to capture you with, say, a Mickey, a drink, and a 17-year-old girl who looks 22. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a trick used by the security agency in that little nation in the southeast corner of the Mediterranean to capture and control U.S. politicians, senators, representatives, judges, officials in the cabinet, military people, business heads. Can you imagine the size of their library? Well, give you an idea. Hugh Hefner was part of that. And they killed him. He didn't die of natural causes. They killed him. Hugh Hefner. Hef. Playboy. Hef. Hef got intertwined with the blackmail. They killed him. They thought he would be too big a risk, so they killed him. And what did they do? They captured his library. Anyway, I believe that my mission with the newsletter started in 2004 is to expose fraud, talk about true economic statistics, talk about legitimate and valid solutions to the dollar and trade payment, and let the chips fall where they may. And we as a nation will have to make reforms in order not to be blackballed and boycotted and become a pariah on the world stage of community of nations. That is exactly what we have become. Our treasury bond is not honored. Our treasury bill is being dumped. Our treasury bill is not honored can't be used as much for trade payment at the ports. We're seeing the BRICS create much more. Now, 8 years ago, John, I was talking about forming critical mass for the Eurasian trade zone. Critical mass. Once they had critical mass, they could go to a gold-backed currency, gold-backed payment system, and the rest of the world would be the minority. I thought you got to get 65 to 70% of the global trade. And that's what the BRICS have got now. Mm-hmm. If you count all the nations that are following their directive, yep, and eventually will seek membership. And it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny because right now Japan is acting more like a BRICS nation than any of the BRICS nations, except maybe China. China still has a lot of treasury bonds. I don't like talking too much about China in shows because it's a puzzle wrapped in an enigma. They've not overcome their Evergrande crisis. They've not overcome it. They're rotting in place. They have no bankruptcy procedures. If they go and declare bankruptcy and dissolve, they'll have to dissolve not only Evergrande, but the Chinese Communist Party. So they don't. They rot in place. Japan is de-dollarizing more effectively than any other country. They've announced a gold standard, and they've announced that they will do their best to defend against the Rothschild and Rockefeller assassinations. They've now shown their cards by going directly in the face of Big Pharma, and they're looking for legal remedy for the vaccine with the double X. They're saying 500,000 Japanese are dead because of the vaccine with the double X. Okay, this is Japan. They're bolder than any BRICS nation. They got my full respect. Yeah. And, I had a little Toyota pickup truck. I bought a cap for it. And I would go camping with friends or alone, Cape Cod. I went on ski trips. I went with friends. I went alone. I did both after my divorce in 1991. It was a tough time for me. I married badly. I never had one problem with my Toyota pickup truck in 6 years. Quality control. I never had one problem with my Nissan pickup truck. I also had a cap for that. 5 years, not a single problem. Not a single problem. 11 years with two Japanese pickup trucks. Not a single problem. I bought a Ford pickup truck because it was a great deal, a great price from a friend of mine. It's one of the biggest regrets I ever had. I had tremendous problems with the Ford pickup truck in 1985 and 6. Ford Ranger, piece of trash. Watch the BRICS coming up in October. They're going to announce a launch. No more trials, no more enhancements, no more beta tests for the unit. 40% gold, 30% two different currencies involved in the trade. Yep. The key nations to watch are India and UAE, United Arab Emirates. India is very unique. India is extremely unique. They were the first big nation to tell the British medical sector to go to hell. We're not going to use your vaccine with a double X. We're done killing our citizens. India told them no more. India then backed off and resisted the British on monetizing temple gold. Then India decided we can act as an intermediary, a very profitable venture, buy Russian oil and sell gasoline and diesel to Europe. Brilliant. Here's what happened though. Russia had 3 super tank shipments of oil, and they took the rupee, the Indian currency. And then in the next round, a few months later, they said, no more rupee. You got to pay us in something else. I don't know what they used in the second round. It might have been yuan from China. It might have been UAE dirham. It might have been a combination. They might have paid them in euros. Because if they sell gasoline to Europe, they might get paid in euros. Give the euros to the Russians can sell the euros on the world market outside the sanctions. Oh boy. What I'm driving at is that India will remain unique because since nobody wants their rupee, they're going to choose XRP. They've already announced it. And UAE has said, we are perfectly willing to work with Europe and India in XRP payments.
Nice.
We're working toward quantum jumps, discontinuous jumps up in the XRP value. I know I go on and on. I bounce around, John. I apologize for it, but
No, it's fine.
it makes it harder for you. Is there another pointed question I could try to respond to?
You covered all the subjects. So before I let you go, Jim, because I want to respect your time, there is one other question I wanted to have you help alleviate and bring in clarity. We have a lot of great subscribers that are very loyal and gracious quality people, as do you. One in particular asked a question who's been there with us virtually from the beginning. His name's Andy White, gentleman out of Texas, very good Christian conservative guy who I've gotten to know a little bit over the years from another show we used to be on together. His concern, I remember, Jim, on one of our podcasts, you discussed that, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my recollection of it. You had said that in 2022, the Prince bin Salman, the original one, I think he had Alzheimer's or something to that effect. They took him out and replaced him with a half brother because there's many heirs to the throne, as you said. And I remember you saying again,
who? Osama bin Laden?
No, Prince bin Salman.
Mohammed bin Salman.
Salman, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry if I wasn't.
Salman. Just call him MBS. Salman.
The original
Prince
MBS.
Salman.
Yeah.
MBS. Prince Salman. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
The original Prince was taken out in I think it was 2022, and they replaced him with a half brother. And at that point, I believe you said that we dropped the bin Salman, and Saudi Arabia dropped the petrodollar at that point, and now it's come out this year. And there's many deniers trying to say that that didn't happen. Can you just confirm factually for him and for anybody who has those concerns that Saudi Arabia has officially dropped the petro yuan at this point?
Well, for God's sake, last 2 months ago, they dropped the petro yuan in a funeral ceremony.
Correct. This is for my audience clarity that asked that question. I just wanted them to
repeat a past event that was fully publicized that they missed. Okay, it was in the news. It remained in the news for several days. I noticed it in the news and I thought, well, that's old news, because a year ago, the Saudis began to accept Chinese yuan for oil sales with primarily China. Mm-hmm. But just think of it as China, Korea, and Japan. The Saudis announced early in 2023 that they would accept on a wide scale Chinese yuan. I covered it in the newsletter on Golden-Jackass. 18 months ago, I covered that. And then 3 months ago, they had a funeral ceremony to announce the official death of the petrodollar. So apparently your fellow in Texas missed both events. There are a lot of people who missed it because they watched the news too much. And I'm not assuming that this fellow watches the news too much.
Right.
But he's in Texas, and Texas covers a lot of oil industry news. And that was a very, very big event in early 23 when the Saudis announced they would accept yuan in Asian oil sales, and I covered it. And I called it the death of the petrodollar. I don't mince words.
Nope.
And what it meant was at the same time, the Saudis were reducing their treasury bond holdings. And 5 and 7 years ago, the Saudis were really pissed off that in the US court system, they were being blamed for 9/11 and the confiscation of $50 billion in treasury bonds that I think was being held in the Exchange Stabilization Fund. So what they did was they used the courts, they used a propaganda BS story to steal 50 billion of Saudi treasury bonds. Now, I got news for people. Those 50 billion were in the banks. They have a lot, maybe close to $1 trillion in Saudi-owned treasuries in the Exchange Stabilization Fund, which acts sort of as an OPEC tax of 25%. Maybe it's 20%. Now, let me get to Mohammed bin Salman. I just call him Prince Salman. Now, for those who hear the term half-brother, I got to do this preface because it's kind of funny. The king is not bound by monogamy. So what he tries to do is get out there and spread his seed. So he might have 6 wives, 8 wives, and he might have a total of his sons. For him, it's not a half son. There's no such thing as a half son. For his kids, there might be 20 boys from 6 different wives. They're the half brothers. And when you have the death of a prince, what do you call it? A crown prince. They call it a crown prince. And it's usually from his favorite wife or his first wife or his favorite wife, or down the road, the wife that treated him the best and the sons that were the best educated, the sons that were the most reliable, the sons that were not drunken fools in London. Okay, there's a lot of mayhem among the half brothers. So when a crown prince dies, that is a big deal. What they did this time, they had intra-family rivalry, and they started to sabotage and attack each other. There might have been some kidnappings. There might have been some theft of bank accounts. And they had an internal war that they kept the lid on. And from what I heard, the original Mohammed bin Salman was murdered by machine gun fire by a group organized by a rival half-brother. I believe that was the case. We had a good 6 months where MBS, that's another name he goes by, 6 months where MBS was never seen. We had stories where certain friends of Saudi royals invited a Westerner to a funeral on condition to never talk about it. We had stories in the grapevine. We had a lot of little indications. And then suddenly there's MBS, and he's in view, and he's got a beard, and a beard hides a chin, and a beard hides more than a little bit. And so does a turban hide. So you got a guy in a beard and a turban, and we're told, well, that's the same guy. Well, if it's a half brother, they have the same father. If they have the same father, you know, this is a very fascinating fact for me as a, part-time scientist. I got a doctorate in statistics, but I got a bachelor's in science. I took science courses. I continue with science reading. What I find fascinating is that sons look like the father and daughters look like the mother. And you get maybe occasional little fatherly traits in the daughter, And you might get the eyes of I have my mother's really nice eyes. I don't have my dad's eyes. My dad had dull gray eyes. And I have blue green, and my mother had hazel green eyes. My mother was a little spectacular beauty. It's not inconceivable. It is very easy to produce a new Mohammed bin Salman. And when MBS came out and showed himself, there was no more internal rivalry. Okay, that's another one of my indications. If it was the same guy and he was sick and he got better and he's now back, he'd have the same half brothers as rivals. I believe he was replaced by a half brother, not a brother by the same mother, a half brother. And the rivalries ended. And there's a lot of confiscation of bad half brothers. There's confiscation of bank accounts for bad half brothers. And this is really interesting. I saw a family tree. This is an amazing, humorous story. It was about 2014. I wanted to produce a family tree of King. What was his name? Oh gosh, I can't think of the father's name. It wasn't Salman, not Khalid. Ooh, I can't think of the father's name. But he battled during the Iraq War, and he did not want Saudi lands used for Air Force bases. I can't think of his name, but he was a powerful, strong, smart, good diplomat, very capable leader. And I produced a family tree. Do you know what a family tree looks like with 6 half brothers and 6 wives? It's what you call flat. It's not a family tree. It's a family patio. Okay. And then they each have kids. So it's like a sprawling bunch of ivy vines, and then they go down. Okay. I believe MBS got replaced. And there's more to the story. King Salman went to Russia a few times, and he never went without his son. And at that time, King Salman was reported to having some Alzheimer's. The father had Alzheimer's, not MBS. And the son helped him to read what he was signing. They'd say, well, can we have 20 minutes to talk among ourselves? And the Russians leave the room. OPEC plus, it's plus Russia. Okay. There's more going on with the Saudi royals, and it has to do with the Line. The Line is a city in the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia along the Egyptian border. And they're trying to make a smart city, but not a smart city to kill like the Americans. It's a smart city to have tremendous efficiency and availability. But, John, this is really nasty stuff. They had to murder some local chiefs, not royals within the family of, oh gosh, I wish I could remember the name of the king before Salman. He was a king for like 15 years. Mohammed bin Salman, the prince, now the acting king, they don't call him King Salman because his father's still a vegetable and he's going to die sometime soon. MBS murdered some chiefs in the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia, and it's going to come back. It's going to come back. And I don't know how, and I don't know when. You don't just murder a couple of chiefs because they don't go along with your urban plan for the Line. Okay, I covered this 1.5 years, 2 years ago in the newsletter. I try to cover interesting little side stories. I hope that answers your question, because right now it is really clear that Saudi Arabia is making peace with the Iranians and the Persians, and they're trying to make an entire Gulf region with no war, no conflict, exchanges of ideas and people, like cultural exchange, and they're using the XRP
Yep.
all across the Gulf region, including in Iran.
Great. Thank you. I just wanted Andy to hear that. So, Andy, there's the answer to your question as promised. Jim, as we end today, where can people find your work on Golden-Jackass and whatever you'd like to say about that?
That's it. It was 2019. My new website manager, he's from the Netherlands, really sharp bilingual guy, and he decided to show his voice because we have now two different, like it's like a spoiler. I don't like that word. It's an introduction, an audio of the report where I do a teaser and try to encourage people to sign up for the newsletter. And he asks me questions and he makes a comment and he reminds me of something that we were going to talk about that I forgot to mention. He's a really sharp fellow, bilingual, very excellent as a website manager, and the technology for website design and security and promotions. He's very good, and I'm grateful to have him. He's been with me now. This will be the end of 5 years. It was 2019, the end of 2019. No, it was the beginning of 2019. 6 years with him. My previous website manager, was actually my secretary. My previous job in Pennsylvania at a consulting firm. They did not get the most out of me by any means. So I started a website and I had no idea what it would become. So it's golden-jackass.com. And right in the center is a subscription button. And that is my stock and trade. That is my guaranteed income. That is what I live on. But I also do consults. I'm up to 770, John, since the beginning of 2019, I think, maybe the end of 2019. I got to check. No, it's 5 full years. So the beginning of 2020. Yeah. And they're like boots on the ground information flow. So I got the subscription. I got consult button. There's a donate button, and PayPal is no longer associated with that. I have no reluctance at all. PayPal did not treat me very well. And one bank in the United States, because of PayPal activity, closed my bank account, and it cost me a lot of heartache. So, I mean, they got the subscription, the donate, the consult, but there's also a sponsor button, and that gets touched once in a while. Let's just say it's for wealthier people who want to support me in a big way for my mission for the truth, and for thanking the Lord Jesus for his helpful hand and lifting me up, because I am knocked down a lot. I am knocked down often. I shed some tears 3 days ago. And I immediately got some support with the sponsor button. And this is not the first time. It's not the 5th time. It's not even the 8th time. It's a lot more often than that. So I preach the truth, and I preach that we are fighting a war where it is satanic rule versus a Christian rule. I think Trump is going to be Christian, but he's going to be wearing a little yarmulke hat a bit too often. The pure Christian is Vladimir Putin. Mm-hmm. The Western Europeans are satanic. The British are satanic. The American Dem fascists are satanic. The Canadians are satanic. The Australians, who got overtaken by China, they're satanic. The New Zealanders, they're satanic. This is a battle of Satan versus God with a Christian face. And we're going to win.
Absolutely.
We've got the Western European royals. They're on the run. They're hiding in Argentina. Argentina is Satanist with a president who's pretending to be Jewish. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So support me, sign up for the newsletter. You don't have to read every chapter every month of the newsletter. I never read the entire Boston Globe for 20 years. I read the finance section, the sports section, some of the front section, which is politics often, and leading stories of the region. I occasionally pulled out the cooking section, grabbed a recipe, made a joke of it, trying, and I'm not much of a cook. I turned out to be a decent lunch cook because when I was married, I made lunch.
Well, Jim Willie, always interesting, always entertaining, and always informative. We appreciate you on the podcast. We'll look forward to having you again next month. And thanks again for all that you do for the community. We greatly appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
I look forward to it. I wear myself out with these, and sorry for my voice, but I think I was understandable even though I was raspy.
You were just
and remember, it's today, September 10th.
Oh.
September 10th. And for all you thieves out there, good luck. I mean, this is a nasty environment. We're getting people pretending to be others on websites and social networks. And here's a funny little fact. When Elon Musk, we didn't talk about him much, but basically he got replaced with a good version. And I don't know the detail. I do not know the details. When his first big project was to acquire Twitter, and call it Twitter X or just X. And then he made an announcement. 30% of all the Twitter accounts were robots. Created by Jack Dorsey, and they were anti-Trump, pro-vax robots. This is what we're dealing with. Our enemies are not just human. They're robots. Okay. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Jim. Take care. God bless.